I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
Hello, all you unexplained ones. Thank you for joining us. I am your host, CJ Derringer, along with my co-host, Dr. Mounts. Hello, Dr. Mounts.
Good evening. How's it going,
Very
CJ?
good. We have such an exciting show. We have a guest coming on with us tonight who used to be a ranger in the Navajo Nation. He was a paranormal investigator. He has worked on cases dealing with everything from skinwalkers to Bigfoot to aliens. And his book, while it is nonfiction, reads like the greatest thriller I've ever read. And we're so excited to talk to Stanley Milton about his book, The Paranormal Ranger. He will be joining us in just a moment. You don't want to miss it. You have to get a copy of this book. We will have a link for you in our chat. Please do purchase one. Also, let us know that you are here. We are a community of people who have open minds, and we learn more from one another. So please do say hello. If you have questions for us or for Stanley, put them in all caps in the chat. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe to our show. Every time you like, comment, and share, it helps us so that we can keep having wonderful guests like Stanley on our show. And we will be right back to get started after this short break.
Yes, we will.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounts' books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show. Welcome, Stanley.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here, CJ and Dr. Mounts.
Yes, you are the perfect guest for our show. I feel like everything that you have done truly encompasses all of the conversations that we have had here on All Things Unexplained. But before we dive in, we did just want to talk briefly about the catastrophes that are happening in Western North Carolina. I'm not sure how aware everybody is. I don't know if mainstream media is covering it or not. Tim and I are in North Carolina and every day are watching heartbreaking videos and hearing stories of families lost, lives lost, houses lost, pets lost, people struggling to get help. We are now 6 days out from Hurricane Helene and people are still without power, water, food, shelter, clothes, and trapped. And it's devastating. And my heart has been very heavy these past few days for our brothers and sisters in Western North Carolina. And I know, Tim, yours has been as well.
Yeah, that's right. And so, all we're asking for tonight is prayers. If you've got them, send them out to Western North Carolina and all those affected by this tragedy. There's terrible stories coming out there. And for some reason, it's not really getting out to the world. And we just want to have all of them in our thoughts and prayers. And we really appreciate it.
Yes. And if it's within your means to give in some way, we're not going to tell you where to do that. There are lots and lots of places. I know the Red Cross is there. I know the United Way has boots on the ground. I know Salvation Army is a place. There are local areas taking in animals. There are shelters here taking in pets. There are people helping kids. There are people helping women. There are just do your research and find a way to help if you can. And that's all we'll say about that for now. But okay, back to the show. Stanley, what an incredibly exciting, terrifying sometimes life you have lived. Tell us a little bit about your background in the Navajo region and also in Oklahoma, and how you came to be a paranormal ranger.
Well, you mentioned Oklahoma and the Navajo reservation, and I grew up between those two places. My mother and father met when he was in college. He had left the reservation in Arizona, and he had gone to Oklahoma to pursue his education at a college there in Northeast Oklahoma, NSU, Northeastern State University, and in the town of Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is the capital of Cherokee Nation. And so they met there, and they moved to the Navajo reservation where my father was from, and they started a family. My older sister is 5 years older than me, Deborah, and but when I was about 2 years old, my mother and father separated, and she took me and my older sister back to Oklahoma. So most of our youth and schooling was there in Oklahoma. From the time we were in grade school and through junior high and high school. I graduated high school there in Tahlequah. And so my father would fly me and my older sister out to the Navajo reservation, flying from Tulsa to Albuquerque during the summertime most years. And we would spend time on the reservation with our great-grandparents and our grandmothers and aunts and uncles and all of our cousins. I have two really large families on both sides. And so we were steeped in the Navajo culture by living out there at times and learning the different customs and traditions of the Navajo people, or Dene as they're known. So yeah, we'll live back and forth between those two. So I grew up in Oklahoma, going to public school, and the curriculum that's within the public schools of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and your sciences and biology and all of those things. And so it afforded me to see later on doing these investigations of what people refer to as paranormal or supernatural from two different perspectives. Yeah. The Western non-Native perspective and that of a Native American and indigenous views. So,
and it seems like for you, very early on, you started having experiences. I was reading in your book where you and your sister were home alone one day, and all of a sudden the gas stove, which you would have to light with an actual match at that time, turned on its own. And then
it did. And so experiencing that kind of thing early on, it begins shaping how you view not only the world, but even the universe and how we fit within that scheme. So,
yes. And you wrote something in your story, which to me, I could just picture so vividly. And again, this is nonfiction, everybody, but it reads like a true mystery, thriller, paranormal. So there's this moment, I think you said you were 17 and you walked upstairs and you noticed something in your sister's room, and it was a big book that looked like it was old and tattered, and you thought maybe it was a Bible, and you went forward and it actually turned out to be some sort of demonic, satanic book, correct?
That is correct. Yeah. And for me, there's those times in my life when I had those experiences where there is no common explanation for those kind of things,
Yeah, your sister said she had never seen it, right? She'd never seen the book. No. She didn't set it there, and you instantly took it and burned it, correct?
Yes, I took it out to a friend's ranch, and him and I, proceeded to destroy the book by burning it page by page, and placing it within a fire to destroy it. Yeah.
Do you think that your decision to burn it affected you in any way in the future? Did anything follow you from that book, you think?
I don't think from that particular event that I've experienced any residual phenomenon or effect from that event. But it's not to say in those kind of experiences that a person couldn't have something. I'll explain here after a while an experience that I had, that there was attachments that were a part of that phenomenon. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you're growing up. You're now a young man, and you're on the Navajo reservation, correct? But you leave to go to school with the promise
I
to
went
come
to
back.
school. I went to college at Haskell Indian Nations. Today it's a university, but it was a junior college at the time I went, in Lawrence, Kansas. And so I went to school there. I went to school at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. And then later on, I was accepted to a pre-med program at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So yeah.
Wow. And then you started as a ranger. Well, police before that, correct?
Well, actually, I was at the University of Arizona going to school. I had started school there when the director of the Navajo Nation's Parks and Recreation, I knew this individual really well. Him and I were good friends. He was one of the first Navajo Rangers, going back to like 1957. And him and I were really good friends. And he contacted me at school and said, Stanley, he said, I was wondering if you would consider coming back home and going to the police academy, because we're needing a law enforcement presence in Monument Valley, which is very well known on the reservation, and some of these other park areas that get a lot of visitation. And he said, we're desperately needing a law enforcement presence in there. And I was wondering if you'd consider it. And I told him that was a really big move. I was already in school, and but I told him I'd think about it and get back to him the next week. But I had already made the decision at that point, when he made the offer, in my mind that I was going to do that, because I had a longing to, from the time I was a kid playing cops and robbers in Oklahoma on my aunt's and uncle Gene and Sue Stacy's ranch, spending time with my older cousin Rusty, who was about a year older than me, year and a half, and he was like a big brother. And we would go racing all over that 2,000-acre ranch on motorcycles, playing Starsky & Hutch, and so I had this dream very early on to be in law enforcement, and I was given that opportunity, and so I knew I was going to jump at it. I did contact that director the following week and said, "Yeah, I'll take you up on your offer." That's how it went. So.
And you paint this great picture of what life was like there. You have people that are driving 100 miles an hour, right? And these fancy cars that are coming to check out the landscape. And then you have the natives there that are driving in some pretty broken down cars. Then you've got old people. You've got people who are fighting over family matters. You've got livestock that you're caring for. I mean, it really reads a lot like the Wild West.
It is Wild West. It really is, in so many different ways. And so the big thing was trying to keep people safe. With all of that coming into a place like Monument Valley, you're trying to keep people safe, and that's one of your primary missions, being a law enforcement officer.
That's a big task there with all that's going on. Especially, it sounded like the infighting between families and some of the discoveries that you happened upon, human to human, were really gruesome.
Yes.
And then you have these outlaws that you're chasing, these potential murderers.
I was fresh out of the academy when I was thrown in on the deep end of the Four Corners manhunt, as it's known, when there was a Cortez, Colorado police officer that was murdered by 3 militia members, and it led to, I guess, the largest manhunt in the Southwest at that time. And at this time, it was 1998, the early part of '98, and so yeah, I that's how I got steeped into SWAT training or tactical officer training early on. I was thrown right in the mix with those guys. I was offered by one of the SWAT commanders if I wanted to participate with them, and I volunteered. I said, if I can get my chief at the time his okay, and my sergeant's okay, I said, yeah, I would definitely volunteer to be a part of it, and I did, and I learned a lot. It really formed a foundation for me to build upon in the years to come, as far as doing tactical operations and special operations.
Yeah, it didn't sound easy. I mean, it sounded pretty gruesome and exhausting and filthy and frightening.
It was all of that. If you consider the Navajo reservation is 27,000 square miles, so it's the largest native reservation in the United States. And the biggest part is in Arizona, and then the next is New Mexico, then Utah, and then now Colorado. We actually have some ranches in the southwest corner of Colorado, Boyer Ranch and Wolf Springs Ranch, where we have herds of buffalo and livestock.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a very, when I left the Rangers at the time that I retired from there, I think we were down near 8 Rangers total for the whole department, for the whole reservation. And when I started, we were somewhere around between 40 and 50 Rangers, commissioned law enforcement Rangers. And so, yeah, it was a huge challenge. Each Ranger's carrying a workload of like 5 law enforcement officers. And it could be very dangerous. You had organized crime involved in a lot of things on the reservation, and especially in that particular area. So yeah, it could be very dangerous to those officers. We had to be trained to the nth degree to keep ourselves alive and the people that we served.
Yes. Yeah. And you have some just fascinating stories from that time. And once again, we are talking to Stanley Milford, the author of The Paranormal Ranger. We actually have a few signed copies that we can give away tonight. So if you are interested, put some comments in there. Tim, I'm going to challenge you with coming up with a game or something that we can do for giveaways. But if you are interested in anything related to the paranormal, these are true stories from Stanley Milford. Not just his, but investigations that he has done where there are multiple people, in some cases 30 people talking about the same thing. Also true crime, or if you're interested in anything about the Navajo Nation, you don't want to miss this book. Pick up a copy for yourself. And I want to dive into some of those paranormal stories. So sounded like your first personal experience was with a skinwalker when you were still a young man. Is that correct?
That was during my college years, and I had gone back home during break in college. And so I had gone to the movies one night. I went to watch one Stephen King movie, Maximum Overdrive. And I have always been a metalhead.
Is that all AC/DC?
Hard rock, all AC/DC soundtrack. And that was appealing to me. And, when I was a kid growing up in Oklahoma, I think I was probably one of the first hard rockers. Everybody else was into, country and western in that part of northeastern Oklahoma. But my mother, for us children, it was like a music appreciation class. We grew up with all of the Motown bands and Beatles and Rolling Stones, and then gradually the bands like Aerosmith and others that influenced how I perceive music. And I actually began playing guitar and drums and different instruments. But anyway, this movie was very attractive to me because of the soundtrack of it. And I had actually gone to the movies that night. That movie let out really late, around midnight. And when I had come out of the movie into the lobby area, there was a really elderly Navajo man that was sitting there on a bench. And him and I struck up a conversation, and he asked if I would be willing to give him a ride back to, happened to be the town that I came from. And I said, sure, yes, I can take you. And I did. We drove, and I dropped him off. But you have to realize that on most of the reservation, there's no street lights, or at that time there wasn't. And it was very dark where he asked to be let out, and I let him out. And I started back on a long strip of highway. And as I was driving out of the passenger side of the car, on the inside of the right-of-way fence, I seen or detected movement. And so I kept glancing back over to see what this was. At first, I assumed maybe it was a horse or something that was running on the inside of the fence. But immediately, whatever this was, as it was running, it cleared that 5-strand barbed wire fence, and it got closer and closer and closer to the vehicle until it was within a couple of feet of the vehicle. And this thing had a similar body shape to what we know as race dogs, or these dogs that like have the really thin bodies and like greyhounds. And
Yes.
But this one was all white from head to toe. The back, it was running on all fours, and its back come up at least a good feet, or maybe 4 feet, and maybe a little bit more. And it had a canine-shaped head with a long snout. It had a mouthful of jagged teeth. But one thing that was really prominent was its eyes. Its eyes were the color of, when you and I go to the movie theater and you have the exit signs up there at the top of the doorway with the fluorescent bright orange, that's the color of this thing's eyes, exactly. And it was like they were self-illuminated. And this thing and I, as I was driving, it was keeping up with me at highway speed, and I locked eyes with it. And at that point, your blood turns to ice water. And I slid down in the driver's seat as far as I could, barely seeing over the steering wheel and the dash, and I floored it. I didn't look back at it. I didn't look in my rear view mirrors, or I don't know what it did at that point. But after locking eyes with it, I didn't want to look at it anymore. I come sliding into the driveway at the house and ran in the house, and my dad happened to still be up, and I was kind of out of breath, and he asked me, what's wrong? And I explained to him what I had seen. I described it, and he said, yeah, son, that's a skinwalker. And so that's, at that point, it really impacted how I viewed life and the universe, because up till that point, really, I had viewed these kind of things as legend or kind of a folktale kind of thing. I had heard about skinwalkers on the Navajo reservation growing up, especially when I was a kid, but to actually see a phenomenon like this with your own eyes, and to come to the realization that this is very real, it's tangible. It's like if it was a horse that had been running by my vehicle, no different than that, as real as that. So it changed my worldview and view of the universe too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, it becomes belief rather than just hearsay. And it also makes you more empathetic to those who have experiences of their own, which is how you eventually get to becoming this paranormal ranger and taking these stories seriously from people that shared with you. And one that really stuck out to me was this Bigfoot sighting, where there were several people who were seeing what they believed to be a Bigfoot and a woman at home with her family, and the Bigfoot's opening the door, and you guys have footprints to show, and she sets up a camera and catches glimpses. I mean, wow, tell us a little bit about what was going on the reservation then, and what you guys did with all this information that you were receiving.
Actually, it was a Bigfoot case that led to the formation of the investigations of the paranormal. And that was actually before there was a case that was before that San Juan River case. There was a case that was up in the Chusca Mountains. The Navajos traditionally will herd their sheep and livestock up into the mountain areas to what's known as sheep camp. And there was an elderly woman that had her sheep up in the mountains. They do so because it's cooler in the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's a lot of foliage. It's really green, a lot of green grass, a lot of water. And so she was up there, and she called the department and said there was what she described was one of these Sasquatch or Bigfoot had stepped over into her sheep corral, picked up one of the sheep, and took off with it. And with the Navajo people, the livestock industry is one of the, I guess, the biggest economic means of providing for your families and stuff. So this was critical. And she called the department and explained the situation. There were 2 young rangers that were assigned. One of these rangers was what I would refer to as a comedian or joker, because he's constantly laughing and joking and carrying on. And I think this personality offended the grandmother. I think she thought maybe that he wasn't taking this seriously. The grandmother recontacted the department and spoke to the chief, and probably scolded the chief. And the chief called a department-wide meeting, and he said to all the staff and the rangers, he said, when you get these kind of cases that are paranormal in nature or supernatural, he said, you've chosen a job in law enforcement for one of 2 things, and that's to either help people or to protect people. And if you've chosen that job and that career for any other reason, then you've chosen the wrong career. And he said, when people have these experiences, for the most part, they are traumatized, whether it's a 10-year-old child, a 10-year-old girl that sees a Bigfoot, or an 85-year-old woman that has the same experience. It's traumatizing to them.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we are there to help people, and we are going to do that. And he looked over at John and I that was sitting next to him, and he said, and you 2 are going to manage all of these cases. It's going to be your responsibility under the Special Projects Unit. And John and I said, yes, sir. We didn't volunteer. We weren't trying to be the Navajo X-Files or anything like that. It was an assignment that the chief gave us, and we took it very seriously. And that's how we approached this. So that's how it began.
Yes. And you had, of course, also, I forgot about this incident with the 26 sheep.
Yes.
That's a big one. Tell us about that
particular case was even before we were assigned to investigate these cases. That was one of the early cases that I investigated myself. And so there was a veterinary officer or veterinary doctor that had been on scene at an incident where there was 26 head of sheep that this family had. They woke up one morning and they went out to the corral, and all of these 26 head of sheep were dead in the corral. And they were split open from the neck area all the way to the groin area. And the doctor, the veterinarian, he was just perplexed. He had no understanding of what had taken the lives of all these livestock. And I remember, I've grown up around livestock in Oklahoma. That ranch that I grew up on was a livestock ranch, so I seen all kinds of things related to livestock, but I've never seen anything like that where these animals were dead and there was no blood within that corral on the ground, as if when you have a predatory kill, a mountain lion or a bobcat, sometimes these animals, or a bear, coyotes, can get into a corral and kill a number of the livestock. But everything that was in that corral was dead, and there was no blood. There was an odd petroleum-based odor in and around that corral. The sheepdogs that typically on Navajo reservation, the sheepdogs become a part of that flock of sheep. They protect the animals, and the dogs would not even come anywhere near that corral. And the whole thing was just had this eerie, odd, non-normal feeling to it. And I couldn't explain it. And everybody, the other law enforcement that came there from the Rangers department, the command personnel, came out to take a look, and there was no explanation for what had happened. This family's, these were owned by two elderly people, all the animals, but the one of the daughters, middle aged, she was really, really extremely upset and wanted me to explain what the hell had happened to her animals. And I couldn't explain it. I didn't know what had happened. And it was really, really strange.
Yeah, that definitely falls in the high strangeness category.
Definitely.
I have so many more stories that I want to hear about, but I want to
Sure.
give Tim a chance to dive in here because I know he has lots of thoughts. But we've got to come back to the coin story because I have a personal link to that in a bit.
Cool.
Oh, yeah, very interesting. We will circle back to the coin story. And we're so pleased to have Stanley Milford Jr. with us tonight. You can find a direct link to purchase his book in the show description, and it'll take you right to it on Amazon. And by the way, the Paranormal Ranger, Stanley told us tonight, just was awarded Best Bio and Memoir for October by Amazon editors. Did I say that right, Stanley?
I think you got it. You nailed it, I believe. So, yeah.
Well, that's a really big deal. And I can tell you, I've got my copy right here.
Cool.
And it's a terrific book. And I think it's powerful because, we were talking about this. It's powerful because it just has the ring of truth to it. It's serious. It's matter of fact. It presents the evidence. It comes off as very truthful and not sensationalized in any way. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. And to follow up on what you were talking about with CJ about these sheep, these animal mutilations, one thing I've always wondered, Stanley, is that what is the comparison, the similarities or differences between witnesses or victims of a paranormal incident and witnesses or victims of a crime, like let's say a murder or something along those lines? Is there any sort of comparison that you have noticed?
When, according to my partner at the time, Jonathan Dover, and the Chief Ranger at the time, Leonard Butler, a victim is a victim. And, you can be traumatized, whether it's a 10-year-old girl that was chased by a Bigfoot from her bus stop all the way home, which is about a mile away. Her and her little cousin were chased by one of these things, and they couldn't even talk when they got home. Their uncle had to coerce out of them what had just happened. And again, I've had elderly people that have had encounters with the paranormal that are just as traumatized. And so I think, for me, trying to, people can make comparisons between the two. And But to me, a victim is a victim, and a person that's traumatized in these, it doesn't matter what the actual trauma was that was inflicted on them. It's still life changing, and so.
Well, were there ever any signs or evidence that you would look for, or telltale signs that sort of provided mundane explanations for some of the things you were called out on as opposed to paranormal? Or was there ever anything that was telltale that made you think, okay, there's something legitimately paranormal going on here?
Well, I do know there was some cases where, today you'll get people faking and fabricating things and hoaxing things. That's very common today, and especially in the day and time of the internet and social media and cell phones. And yeah, I mean, especially with the use of AI today, it's going to be a challenge to be able to determine if something has been created by computers or this kind of thing, artificial intelligence. But there was a case that John and I had investigated one time when there was a Navajo woman who claimed that she had somebody practicing witchcraft against her, and that there was these shapeshifters known as skinwalkers coming around her hogan or her Navajo home. And John and I got into the investigation, and we looked at the evidence that was presented there. We sought assistance by medicine men, Navajo medicine men, in some of the facts. And it ended up turning out that there were, like a typical Scooby-Doo case, there were individuals that were trying to scare this woman out of her home because they had taken over her home when she had been away for a couple of years and had recently moved back there. And they wanted her out of there. So they were hoaxing that there was somebody practicing witchcraft. But in the end, it turned out that wasn't the case. It was just a group of people that were trying to scare her out of her home. And like I said, it read like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, with this. So.
And they would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those pesky paranormal rangers.
Paranormal Rangers, damn it! Yeah, that's true.
What a story! Holy cow! Yeah. Well, again, we've got Stanley Milford Jr. here with us, author of the amazing book, The Paranormal Ranger, and we do have a few signed copies to give it away tonight. Just subscribe to our YouTube channel. Nothing big. We're just about to hit 12,000 subscribers is all. So subscribe to the channel and make a comment or a question on one of our socials. And we've got a few preloaded, as a matter of fact. And we'll let you know after the show if you've won a signed copy of The Paranormal Ranger by Stanley Milford Jr. Now, Stanley, one thing I've actually been wanting to ask you for quite a while, and we've had this show in the works for quite a while. I'm going to share my screen of a post from the Navajo Police Department dated February 26, 2024. And it's an updated Navajo Nation missing persons poster. And we essentially have 73 individuals here, some missing since the 70s. And there's 22 females, 51 males. It's got the contact number for the Navajo Police Department tip line if anyone has any tips on these missing persons. It has a breakdown of the missing persons in each district. 15 in Window Rock is the most, followed by 13 in Shiprock, 11 in Crown Point, 10 in Tuba City. And I've also heard, Stanley, that there is another very serious epidemic that is striking the Navajo Nation, and that is missing women. And I don't know how that applies to this poster here, but there's no doubt that part of this is, domestic violence and crime and other mundane explanations. But what can you offer here on the missing persons?
In this country, from time to time, like what is happening in your area of this country, there are crises that happen, and it affects a great many people. And I feel we all need to come together to help these victims, just like what I did when I was working as a law enforcement officer. And uh, this is the United States, and we're all Americans. And we can do a much better job to learn to respect each other's differences and our cultures, to help each other and to protect each other. You know, it's a tragedy that in this country, children aren't safe getting off the school bus and walking home. And when a child in Japan can travel across the city of Tokyo at a 6-year-old girl and still get home safely. And we need to have that kind of country once again, you know, where our children are safe to play outside and we don't have to worry about them being victimized. And but in this situation, there is a crisis with missing Indigenous women and also some males too. And not only that, you know, when you consider that there's 570 plus Native American tribes in the United States, and there are a lot of these tribes that are affected by missing people. A good friend of mine, David Pilates, of the Missing 411 series, in our discussions, you know, this happens all too often across this country, where we have people that come missing all of a sudden. And you can go into your local Walmart store, and on their billboards, you see person after person that's come up missing. And I have come to feel that, you know, in my investigations of the paranormal, I think in some of these cases, some of them would be considered paranormal related. You know, I mean, I've seen all types of different paranormal phenomenon over the years that I know exist, that can't be explained by natural phenomenon and normal explanations. So, yeah.
Well, you know, CJ and I both have come to believe that these areas of the country, places like the Navajo Nation, places in certain parts of New Mexico, that there's just something special about these places that dates back for the entirety of human history, right? If not before, thousands, millions of years. But not only that, you know, do you have any other theories or
Well,
thinking about
um,
proclivity for these places to paranormal activity, or towards, you know, things like we're talking about happening?
CJ earlier had mentioned a case that I had investigated involving a haunting in an office space in Winter Rock. And one of the phenomena within that investigation was what is referred to as an apport, APPORT. That word comes out of the spiritualist movement in this country and in other countries in the late 1800s and early 1900s. At the time when the Ouija board or the talking board was created, and following the advent of the Civil War in the United States, where there was a huge loss of life, and there were families that lost family members and that wanted to try to attempt to communicate with those lost loved ones. And so anyway, in this investigation, there was coins that would materialize out of thin air. Sometimes they would fall from 3 feet or so and appear out of nothingness and fall in the floor. Or sometimes they would come flying across the room from 12 to 15 feet up in the upper corner of the room. And sometimes these coins would hit us. And in that original investigation in 2009, there was a total of 66 coins that materialized. And out of all of these coins, they would behave like any coin that you would pull out of your pocket and flip into the air it may hit the floor and create a big arc and come in and spiral and fall over. But out of all of the coins, they would land heads up. So you and I know, out of statistics and probability, that's not going to happen normally. You'll have at least around 50% of the coins either being heads or being tails. And in this case, all of them landed heads up in that investigation. And in this particular case, the phenomenon actually attached to me, and the phenomenon still happens to me. I mean, I can be traveling in places like Toronto, Canada, or Scotland and other places, and the coins will manifest and apport out of thin air. Last month, I had the most coins apport in a short period of time of 3 weeks. I had 4 dimes that materialized within my own bedroom. And so it still happens to me, and they all still land heads up. You know, I analyze this from all different viewpoints and directions, and the metallurgy, the years, the type of coin, and we really came up empty-handed with that. But
I wanted an answer.
I did want an answer, but I think the answer was actually
yeah,
was very simple, and it's heads up. I'm present. It's spirit letting me know that I'm present. I'm near you, and I'm around. And,
so I just have a quick story to tie into that. So I just learned this story of yours very recently, and it triggered in my mind. Somebody else had told me that they had been finding dimes everywhere. Everywhere that they went, they were finding dimes. And I'm not going to share this person's name because I did not ask their permission. But so today I reached out and I said, tell me about these dimes that you find everywhere you go, no matter where they travel to, there are dimes. And apparently it's not just her, it's also her 2 sisters, that they all find these dimes, and it's been happening since their mother passed away. They'll open their car door and 5 dimes will fall out, or they'll be wearing their shoe all day long. They'll take it off and there's a dime in it. So I had just finished this conversation, came home, I opened my dryer, and a penny fell out of my dryer and landed heads up on the ground. And I thought,
oh boy.
Okay. This is today. This happened today. Like the universe is speaking to me. Heads up, somebody is here paying attention. So I had hoped you had
me all the time.
Figured out what it was. Yeah. Wow.
But actually, the apporting of coins is a very common experience when it comes to the paranormal. I come to understand that the metal, involved in for spirit to manipulate and to do things with is with the energy that a spirit can manifest, causing the apports of the coins. It can do this readily, and these are experienced around the globe regarding the coins and things like that. Sometimes there's a mass of coins that people experience, and so it happens to me so often. This bag is filled with coins over the years. Since that original investigation, and I'll take a Ziploc bag and date and time the experience and where it happened, maybe photograph it, and but I have a whole bag of those coins. I don't know how many I have today, so I might be able to do my laundry with coins.
And then you'll just keep getting it back. You get to do free laundry.
Exactly.
I have a feeling somebody with one of the Ghostbuster type instruments would love to scan those coins in that bag. It also reminds me of this other story that CJ and I know about. Former guest from Board Camp Crystal Mine.
Yes, I thought the
in
same
Arkansas.
thing.
And they've been featured on television with Josh Gates, and they have crystals that, what would you call it? Teleport, appear,
just land on their porch
out of nowhere. Crystals. And so this is a property full of crystals that they discovered, but they seem to be able to just phase in and out into various other locations on the property. So It really reminds me of that, which is interesting.
That original investigation and even the incidents that happened today, there was an epiphany with it. At one point, I realized that these coins were manifesting in our physical world where you and I are today from some other location.
Mm-hmm.
I witnessed that at least 10 times in that original investigation, where out of nothingness, out of thin air, a coin materializes and falls in the floor. And it made me realize that all of a sudden that all of these things we were seeing with all of these different paranormal and supernatural cases, the Bigfoot, the UFOs, the witchcraft related things, that these things, the commonality was this idea of other dimensions and other planes of existence. So for most people, they have the idea that when our physical body leaves this world, when it goes back into the ground, that our spirit, our life force, our energy, or our soul goes somewhere else. Some people refer it to heaven and other planes of existence. And, Einstein, in his theories, he refers to the fact that energy does not just disappear and evaporate, that it only can change form. And so if you consider how many people have at once walked this planet that you and I are on today, I've heard some figures up around 1 trillion humans have actually been on this planet at one time or another. And if all of them had a spirit, a life force, then no matter where we go on Earth, we will most likely encounter spirits of ancient people and people from the past. And I think that's what's happening. The Bigfoot, John and I lived in the forest at times as Navajo Rangers. We did not see the evidence that these things were living in the forest like you would have with a bear, a mountain lion, a coyote, all of these different wildlife. There just wasn't the evidence that these things were living out there like that. Some people today claim that these things migrate and things of that nature, but we never, we patrolled all of that 27,000 square miles and we did not see that evidence. I think these are interdimensional beings that are either crossing over into our physical world. People see them, they'll leave the Bigfoot tracks and the hair and this kind of evidence there that we come along and collect, but then they cross back over and people are wondering, where did this thing go? Where did it go? UFOs, come into our atmosphere and we see them, and then all of a sudden they're back over on somewhere else. And I think it's very common among all of these things.
Yes, I would agree with you, Stanley. And we're approaching our hour here. Can we have more of your time? Are you good to go with some listening
I am
questions
great.
and hot
As long
takes?
as
Okay,
you,
there's so much
you
wonderful stuff to cover.
Sure. Yeah, there is. There's 23 years as a ranger that
Yes.
I had cases and investigations that I had. Sure.
I bet. Well, Tim, let's dive into some of your hot takes because I think that they will also cross over with some of Stanley's other stories as well, things that he's experienced.
Well, for sure. And I'm so intrigued by what you just talked about with the Bigfoots. And we've had interdimensional Bigfoot experts on the show with us. And honestly, one of my hot takes, though, was something else I wanted to talk about. And I don't know if I actually have a button. Oh, yeah, here we go. You're talking about souls, and some people think souls are a part of this, but some people think maybe it's UFOs, and some people just don't know. But Stanley, what do you make out of orbs? There's a lot of talk about orbs. Are these friends or foes? What do you think?
I've witnessed numerous orbs over the years, and just like let's say with the what the Navajo refer to as the skinwalker or the shapeshifters. Again, I mentioned 570 something tribes here in the United States, and a lot of them have references to these shape-shifting beings. But if you travel the globe, when John and I were in Scotland, we talked to people out of Ireland and other places, and there's references in Europe about, obviously, werewolves. There's cultures and communities over there where the werewolf is a very real part of their culture. And you can travel the globe, and these different cultures and countries will have references, even like the Bigfoot, the Bigfoot, Sasquatch. There's the swamp ape. There's the Yowie in Australia, and the Yeti in the alpine regions. And I think these phenomena are found throughout the world, but also with orbs. With Bigfoot, there are a sighting of orbs. With UFOs, there are a sighting of orbs. Hauntings, there are references to orbs. There's different shapes and sizes and colors. There are investigators that have theories about the different colors and what that means. Some of these are found in the Navajo witchcraft, these deep red orbs that are sighted in and around a sighting of a shapeshifter or skinwalker. And I think, I've seen different orbs throughout my career of investigation, and very interesting. I was one of these little kids that, as a child, on Christmas, I would get a little toy robot that could walk or something. But by the end of the day, I'm in my bedroom with a screwdriver taking it apart to try to see what makes it work, and I'd usually get in trouble for that being that way. But I was very inquisitive, and even in my career as a ranger, when it came to the paranormal, I always wanted to understand more about it. So, yeah. But a lot of times, as I got into the investigations, at the very end, I'd have more questions than I had answers.
Oh yeah,
It's just
a true rabbit hole. We've been down those rabbit holes all the time on this show.
Yes.
Stanley, one thing I wanted to ask you about for another hot take over Super Bowl weekend last weekend.
Try again.
Not last weekend, last year. Hey, maybe it'll happen this year too. But last year, Super Bowl weekend, NORAD scrambled jets to 3 different locations, Dead Horse, Alaska, the Yukon, and I believe Lake Michigan, to shoot down UFOs. Pretty phenomenal story if you think about. And, in your book, The Paranormal Ranger, you talk about an encounter between the military and a UAP and some F-16s.
Yes. John and I were assisting some of the local law enforcement, the Navajo Police and National Park Service. A person had drowned in the San Juan River, which is the northern boundary of the Navajo Reservation. John and I had put our boat in the water at Lake Powell and had traversed the San Juan River, probably about 70-something miles. And we ran into a debris field late in the day, and we just decided, well, we'll pull a boat out of the water and we'll camp overnight. And as we were laying there on our cots, I noticed an object that was coming from due west to due east. And this was maybe 4 times the size of what we see today with satellites. It was kind of an off-white color. But it was traveling in this unique zigzag pattern as it moved across the sky. And as it got about our 12 noon, we noticed that there was 2 F-16 fighters following in behind this object. And so all of a sudden at the 12 noon position, this object accelerated to the east and went from 12 noon all the way to the edge of the horizon in about a second and a half. And it had to be, we estimated somewhere like 10,000 miles an hour moving. And it was one of those incidents where, you are wondering what in the heck you just witnessed. There's nothing within the military arsenal that's capable of performing at that speed and with that pattern that we know of, that's on the face of our military equipment. It left the F-16s just trailing along like a little child on a tricycle or something. It was
Crazy.
mind blowing. Yeah, it was.
Well, did you notice a lot of military activity over in the Navajo Nation?
Oh, we do all the time. You know, I before the stealth bombers were out, and I used to see the SR-71 Blackbird come cruising in through Monument Valley at times, and so yeah, there was a lot of military presence. I've seen the little birds, or these little bitty special operations helicopters used by Rangers and Delta Force over the Navajo Reservation at times when we would have incidents of UFO sightings and things of that nature. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I would love to get your hot take on what many consider to be the keystone event in ufology. So speaking of UFOs, and it also happened in what we refer to as one of these special places. So let's go back to 1947, Stanley. What's your hot take on the Roswell incident?
Well, when you look at the different witnesses that came out of Roswell, and, you know, during my law enforcement career, I was trained numerous times by the FBI and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and other law enforcement organizations, how to interview people and to identify deception and by human behavior. And with a lot of that, you know, when I've seen the interviews, there's no telltale signs of that these people are hoaxing what it is they've experienced and what they're conveying. And I think back in the day, there was an interest by, and probably still is today, that countries want to obtain the technologies that's found in a lot of the crashed UFO objects and or the beings that might occupy those objects. But there's also a mission to militarize these technologies for to have over your adversaries. And I think there was the attempted control over all of Roswell, even to the point of threatening people. Today, with the internet, you know, you and I are sitting here talking a great distance from each other, but we're talking in real time. And today we can do that around the globe and share information in real time. It's kind of hard for governments to suppress that, you know, the free speech, the sharing of ideas in social media. And so I think the internet has done a great service to allow for people to share these experiences of the paranormal and UFOs, and other things like that. So, yeah.
Well, now, you know, incidentally, right after Roswell, we had some other things happen, like the formation of the CIA, the formation of the Air Force, and, you know, other legends in ufology, such as Men in Black. Have you ever noticed any sort of Men in Black incidents on Navajo Nation?
You know, the men in black that I observed weren't actually wearing black uniforms or black dress attire. They were special operations personnel, like what you see with Delta Force and what you've seen in the Middle East. You know, people that served with the Navy SEALs and these other highly trained organizations. And I've seen these personnel, which I've trained with them, you know, at places like Gunsight. You know, being a SWAT team officer, we had to be trained to the nth degree. And we trained alongside of these Rangers and the Navy SEALs. And we actually got to spend time with them on the shooting range and training alongside them. And they have a certain demeanor, a certain way of talking and speaking, a certain way of dress. And so these were identified on the Navajo Reservation at times when we would have incidents where there was a sighting of UFOs and or extraterrestrial beings, and so yeah, they do exist. I've seen them.
Wow. Did they ever try to coordinate with you, or they just kind of did their own thing?
No, for me, having trained with these people, they are there for a reason and they are on a mission. And for me, having trained alongside of them, I'm not going, if they're there for national security purposes, for the safety and well-being of this country, I'm not going to interfere with that in any way. And, I'm in honor of these people that risk their lives to protect us as U.S. citizens. And so I'm not going to interfere with that. And so.
Well, I have to say I have one more hot take for you, if you don't mind, and a couple of listener questions.
Sure.
But there are a million other things I would like to talk about. But you know what? Our listeners can definitely find them in here, The Paranormal Ranger. We have a link to purchase the book in the show description. So make sure to pick up a copy of Amazon's October Best Bio and Memoir by Amazon editors. So pick it up in the show description. We got a link there. There's so much more in the book than we can ever hope to cover in one episode. But Stanley, you've brought up something quite a few times tonight that is brought up in relation to another particular property out there, a property that our show has a lot of friends at, working over there at Skinwalker Ranch. What's your take on Skinwalker Ranch?
John and I, over the years, after we began doing the presentations globally, we were approached by Netflix if we would do an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. And we did work with them to do that season 5, or yeah, I think it's season 5. No, season 3, episode 5 of Unsolved Mysteries. And but we've also done work with Secret of Skinwalker Ranch and Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And so we've been featured on those programs. Matter of fact, as we speak, John Dover is traveling to Los Angeles to be a part of the Ancient Alien series, which he's already been on for a number of times. And but we've been to Skinwalker Ranch, and they afforded us to travel throughout that property, which is secured today. But there is definitely a phenomenon there. Over the years of working with different paranormal phenomenon, I have become more sensitive to those phenomenons with that gut instinct or sixth sense today. And I can go into a property, and whether it's a building or no matter where I am, and I can pick up on the energy that's present there, whether it's good, bad, or benign, but when John and I were one time when we were up on Skinwalker Ranch, there is definitely something there as far as paranormal or supernatural energies. And it's maybe been there for, who knows, for hundreds or thousands of years before man come along. I don't know.
I think that CJ would agree that we totally agree with that assessment.
We do agree with that assessment.
Well, thank you so much
answers.
for that, Stanley. And
Sure,
CJ,
sure.
Should we cover a couple of listener questions, or do
Yeah,
you want to
go to
circle back on anything before we did?
I see one by a Mary Louise.
Yes,
Who
let's
is
pull that in.
asking if there's more likely for women, men or women to report or, I guess, experience paranormal cases. And for me, in what I've seen, having traveled the world, they're both sexes and even other genders today have experiences of these different types of phenomena. It's not exclusive to one or the other. Now, you and I may have cultural or an upbringing that allows us to share that information more readily than other persons or other genders, but for the most part, I think if you travel the globe you would actually be hard pressed to find a single family that doesn't have a family member somewhere in their family tree that has not had a paranormal or supernatural experience, whether that's a haunting experience or a sighting of a UFO or extraterrestrials or Bigfoot. I think paranormal, as my sister Deborah says, paranormal is normal. And I think mankind has inherited an actual paranormal world long before we ever walked this little planet. And if you look at the Red Rock Canyons with the pictographs and petroglyphs or cave art in Africa or other places, Australia, you know, there's depictions of what can be interpreted as UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, Bigfoot, these other things that have been there for thousands, sometimes thousands of years. So I think it's something that's a lot of times that has been there for a long time.
Yes. And you know, we really don't have a way of reporting these things per se, other than sharing them amongst ourselves. I think that your specific job in the Navajo Nation was a little different than what we have outside of it. We don't have a paranormal ranger or a paranormal police that we can go to if we experience something. Many times people are just laughed at for things that they share. So it's really more just in communication in our communities and families.
I did see recently where the major cities, I forget the acronym, the major cities, metropolitan law enforcement chiefs put out a document where it acknowledges that law enforcement officers are very likely to encounter UAPs in their regular daily patrols.
Wow.
You know, law enforcement officers are we're out there 24/7 patrolling all over the country. So we're going to be seeing things. We are, whether that's a haunting situation or UFOs in the sky. You know, you're out there and you're going to see that. In the past, traditionally in law enforcement, an officer had an encounter or seen something, he didn't talk about it for fear of being ridiculed.
Sure.
Or, you know, just like airline pilots or military pilots, you were, if you did bring it up, you might have been shunned by your coworkers or your fellow people within the community.
Right.
So you kept quiet about it. But I think the more and more you have people that like Lou Elizondo and these others that are coming forward that are actually writing books, and these publishers like HarperCollins are taking it serious, and they're actually publishing these things today and getting the works out there so people can pick up the book and read it on their own. And like for myself, you know, this was a part of my job. I'm not out there trying to sell an idea or belief. You know, this is what I experienced, and this was the investigations that John and I had. And we, you know, as criminal investigators, we collected evidence, we did the interviews, and we wrote reports to let that evidence speak for itself. And so I hope people today are starting to take this more and more seriously. The people that experience this a lot of times are traumatized.
Yes.
And we need to be more accepting and willing to listen to what their experiences were, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And we have another question here. This came in before. Oh, sorry.
CJ,
Tim.
let me interrupt real quick. We would love to, Mary, we would love to send you a signed copy of the Paranormal Ranger. So message us on our socials or email us allthingsunexplained@yahoo.com.
Great. Cool.
Okay. And this one came in before our show even began.
Yeah.
I'm going to butcher all of these words.
I'm glad
Spider
you're reading
Woman.
this. And we want to send this listener of the friends of the show a signed copy of the Paranormal Ranger as well. So Chizzy, message me after the show.
So with this message, they're asking about, they're using the Navajo spelling of a reference to what is known as Spider Woman. So the individual that's referred to as Spider Woman was a character that is a being within the Navajo or Dene emergent story or the creation story. And this being is basically given was the person who taught the Navajo people, who are known for their weaving skills. This Spider Woman introduced weaving to the Navajo culture and the Navajo people. And so Spider Woman, her home is found in the heart of the Navajo reservation at the top of what is known as Spider Rock in Canyon de Chelly. This past summer, I was afforded to do an expedition into Canyon de Chelly for several days, camping out and seeing the petroglyphs and the ruined sites and spending time in that and hearing more about these cultural references, which were very, very amazing and very enlightening. But yeah, that's the reference to Spider Woman. Long before Stan Lee's Spider-Man in Marvel Comics. And,
one Stan Lee to another Stan Lee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, we have a couple more questions that I'll throw in here real quickly. And interestingly, we had somebody on our show not too long ago who spoke to us about this exact incident where scientists at CERN are potentially opening portals and being left them a scarf, much akin to the Spider Rock. I'm not sure how that Spider Rock correlates there, but maybe you know.
So with CERN, today they're doing a lot of different cutting edge experiments in reference to the possibility of other dimensions and opening gates to other planes of existence. And so it's a lot of cutting edge technology, studying things like the God particle, and a lot of theories that have been out there from the time of Einstein and others. These brilliant people, they're actually being able to experiment and conduct tests about some of these theories. And so it's hard today to discern, what, like in this situation about a scarf being left behind, is real, or if it's internet fodder and social media fodder. Like I said, today it's really going to be a challenge to determine if what we're seeing is real or if it's something that artificial intelligence has created and simulated, where it looks to the eye to be very, very real. And so we're going into the future at this point. We're going to be really challenged. Today we have drones and things in our skies that make us wonder if it's what we're actually seeing. There's talk of craft that are nuclear powered that can perform these amazing and unbelievable feats. And so it's going to be a challenge. It really is, going into the future, to be able to discern what is real and what isn't.
Yes. Well, I have one more question for you before we wrap things up, and that is in regards to Bigfoot. So we've had many people on our show that are Bigfoot experts and have written books, and typically they all believe Bigfoot to be a very peaceful creature. Some of the stories in your book felt like they were filled with a lot of fear. People were afraid of what they were seeing or what was following them. Do you think that they had reason to be fearful, or do you think that they were just afraid because it was so unknown?
when you look at that phenomenon that has gone back for a long, long, long time, there was even the former president, Theodore Roosevelt, wrote about in a book that he had about an experience that he had heard about a trapper back in Montana, in that region of Montana, a long time ago. And in this particular, these references, there was they had surmised that one of these Bigfoot had actually killed an individual. And so for me, I mean, you look at mankind, and you and I have extremes. We have the Charles Manson on one hand, and we have Mother Teresa and other people that have dedicated their lives to helping and protecting people. So you have extremes with mankind. So if the universe is infinite, and if you also consider this idea also multiverse, how vast and endless the universe is. If you have beings spread out throughout that space, then there's most likely the idea that you'll have the friendly types that are willing to help mankind and protect mankind and try to preserve mankind, even from its own self at times.
Yes.
And then you may have the aliens that want to have us for dinner, literally. So you can have both extremes.
Right.
I mean, if you look at North America, before Western civilization had come to this continent, there were people from Italy and other places coming to this continent for many different reasons. They were coming for religion. They were coming to find gold. They were coming for the fountain of youth. They were coming in different types of craft to this shore. And so for a wide range of reasons. And for me, I think throughout the universe, you'll have, as the Chinese culture referred to yin and yang, you have polar opposites that exist. You have the good and you have the bad. You have the black, you have white. You'll have those references, daylight, dark, that exist naturally. With a 9-volt battery, you've got a positive and negative terminals on it. And I think that you can't have one without the other. You can't have one existence without the other. And so I think that with it comes with the paranormal and extraterrestrials, I think you can have both sides of it. We just need to be very cautious as we go about our lives and these encounters with entities and other beings.
Yes. Tim, any last questions before I get final thoughts?
Well, no, I think Stanley made a lot of great points. And, I really liked what you said, Stanley, when you said that we have inherited a world full of the paranormal, skinwalkers, Bigfoots, UFOs, orbs, on and on and on, right? So I thought that was a really great point. I love how you brought up Einstein and some of these others. It makes me think of this comment I heard recently talking about the James Webb Space Telescope, and we've all probably heard of Schrodinger's cat, in the box, and is it alive or is it dead? Well, it's both. It's everything until somebody observes it. And I heard someone speculating, okay, well, what about the James Webb Telescope? It's now seeing so far into the vast distances of space and the universe that it's literally looking back in time. So does this observation effect apply to the things that the James Webb Space Telescope sees? I don't know. It's just food for thought.
One thing you have to consider is that man's theories and his science and his physics apply to really Earth and the environment within a certain range of the Earth. if you're able to travel further out into the universe, those same sciences and theories are not going to be applicable to places out in the universe. There are elements out there that we are not even aware of. And we're seeing evidence of that kind of thing to this very day. So I think mankind actually knows very, very little. I think we barely scratched the surface of science and understanding of our universe. And so we have to be careful about saying, well, this is the way it is out there and stuff. I think there's, the universe is infinite. The James Webb only reaches out so far from Earth,
Right.
And beyond that, there's endless space. There's infinite universe that we could not even imagine.
Yes. But lucky us that we get to imagine, right? That we get to get together and think about all of these things. And we do have so much to learn about ourselves in the universe. And so I do want to just get your final thoughts on this. You've had wonderful and wild and terrifying experiences, both with the human form and the paranormal, with skinwalkers, UFOs, orbs, money falling from the sky, Bigfoot, murders, mysteries. What does it all mean? What can we take from all of your experiences and take with us as we go out into the universe to live our lives?
Well, I think, many indigenous cultures around the globe have this theory or idea that everything is interrelated. Everything is interconnected. And I tend to follow that understanding. And if you consider that these paranormal phenomena that people have experienced for hundreds of years or thousands of years, possibly, that these things are real, or some of them are real, that if we look at that and realize there are things beyond what we see right in front of us, that it'll make us realize that here on this planet, our number one priority should be preservation of the earth. It shouldn't be fighting over the land and causing war and causing the death of innocent children, over and over. This behavior is so primitive. We were given the ability to reason. We were given a brain to be able to live with our fellow man and even the other beings and entities of, throughout space and time and universe, that we need to come together to help each other and support each other and be respectful of each other, and especially our cultures. I think in the United States, our differences is what makes this country great. The different cultures and foods and music and art, that's what makes us as a human race great. And that's what our Creator has provided for all of mankind. Instead of fighting and because of our differences and how we look and our skin color, and our religion and beliefs, we need to be coming together to help preserve this planet, because we're one little speck in the universe out there. And we are very special because we have air and water that we need to keep clean for future generations of humanity.
Absolutely.
So I hope we come together.
I want to follow up on that real quick, if that's okay. Stanley, I've heard people speculate that we are seeing an increase in paranormal activity, UFOs, Bigfoot encounters, orbs, skinwalkers, etc., that maybe there's a thinning of the veil that separates our realities, our dimensions, and this is what's leading to this. Have you noticed an increase in paranormal activity? And if so, why?
Well, I think one of the things that has occurred that has led to this idea of an increase is the internet. The internet hasn't been around that long. And so in this day and time, like I said, where we are able to speak to someone in real time around the globe, to be able to share ideas and even images instantaneously in real time, it has afforded people to share these ideas. And so, like I said before, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a family that does not have a family member that has a paranormal experience or UFO experience. People are having these things, but in the past they've never shared that before. And today, with the technologies, we each carry around a cell phone that can send images and text messages around the globe in real time. I mean, today we have watches that are capable of talking like Dick Tracy, into, and so the technology is constantly advancing, but it has facilitated the ability to share these ideas. And it seems like there's more and more experiences when, like I said, if you go back to the cave paintings and the canyon walls, that stuff has been occurring all along. And we just now are starting to notice that, hey, this stuff exists. This stuff is around us.
You probably just lost some people with the Dick Tracy watch reference. You didn't lose me. I knew what you were talking about. I used to read Dick Tracy every Sunday in the paper. Exactly. My parents had the paper.
I did too, and it's a reality today. These
I
technologies.
bet CJ, you might have lost her on the Dick Tracy.
I've heard of Dick Tracy. Come on.
What? Okay.
Cool.
Can't say I was reading it in the Sunday paper, but
whoops.
Right.
Before I throw it back to CJ, I do want to follow up on that one more time, but I'm going to leave it open-ended because this is a great example of the rabbit hole that is the paranormal and these types of situations. And you brought up the internet and how it clearly does help get out stories of the paranormal and UFO encounters and everything more than ever before in human history that we know of, right? But it's so interesting. As soon as you said that, I thought, wow, how interesting. One of the key figures in ufology, Jacques Vallée, essentially invented the internet for all intents and purposes. And he's a key figure in ufology, remote viewing, on and on and on. And here he is, integral in the literal invention of the internet. But we can save that for another show.
sounds good. Well, I think what I learned tonight is that we all just need to be a much more peaceful species. If there's any hope for us as humanity to explore the universe, we've got to take care of each other and take care of this planet that we have here. So if you joined us tonight, I hope that you will be kinder to one another, that you will help one another, love one another, and you'll leave us with an open mind and share thoughts and ideas with others, and that you will go out and purchase Stanley's book, The Paranormal Ranger. I promise you will not be disappointed. It is a very fun, enlightening, exciting read. And we are so grateful to you, Stanley, for joining us. Tim, I'm going to throw it to you to send us out.
All right. Stanley brought up a great point tonight. We inherited a world full of mystery. Okay. Paranormal activity, skinwalkers, UFOs, Bigfoots, orbs, poltergeist, you name it. It's been out there for thousands or millions of years before we ever set foot on this globe, on this planet. So let's take a lesson from that. Get off our phones, get off our screens, head out into the wilderness outside. Look up at the stars, head out into the woods, go hiking. You might not find Bigfoot. You might not find a UFO, but you might find something even more important, and that is you might find yourself out there somewhere. And I want to highlight some comments here. A friend of the show, Elections Reform Repairs, who CJ is also in North Carolina down the road in Greensboro. And Elections Reform, by the way, I really want to give you a shout out here because you were talking about heading out to Western North Carolina, I believe, with a chainsaw the other day and doing what you can. Elections lives in Greensboro or very near Greensboro. And that's exactly what I was talking about. I really feel the urge that I want to get out there somehow and actually have my boots on the ground helping people somehow. But it's a very difficult and challenging thing.
thank you to everyone that's pitching in and helping those in need in that hurricane relief area. There are people, so many people that are in dire situations, and please, if you're capable of helping, no matter what it is, please reach out and do that. Even if it's only a prayer for these individuals. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Mary Louise, thank you. She said this interview was very interesting. Thank you, everyone. And Stanley, maybe you could tell us what Chizzy said here.
He's saying a kiahat, and that's saying thank you. Thank you, Stan, CJ, and Dr. Mounts.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Love
thank
it.
you. All right, Stanley, we appreciate you for joining us tonight. CJ, thanks
Sure.
for being back again.
I love being part of the your show and All Things Unexplained. I appreciate it.
All right, great. We've got some exciting things coming up. And CJ, anything else?
Nope, that's it. Everybody stay happy, stay strange, and keep listening to All Things Unexplained. Till next
Good
time.
night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
All Things Unexplained.
What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you
Okay.
want it about the
Yes,
Alaska.
we do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounts' books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.